This is something that I do a lot of research on and I'm very interested in. And I always like to start when I talk about this telling people how I got interested in this particular topic. So as was mentioned, before I went back to grad school to get my doctorate, I worked as a high school and middle school teacher for a few years. And I taught down in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Broward County schools. And when I taught down there, I was right out of college. I looked younger than most of my students. And I went through a typical teacher ed program, did my student teaching, did all the stuff you need to do. But one of the things that I realized after the fact is that there were certain things that they didn't tell me about in my teacher ed program. And one of them was how much kids cheat. And that was something that absolutely amazed me when I started teaching. Almost from the first day, I just kept seeing kids cheat, and I kept catching them cheat. And it amazed me, A, how much they did it, and B, how bad they were at it, and how easy it was for me to catch them. But and then I went to grad school, and then I'll tell you a little bit after about how I sort of got into this. But there's sort of all the different kids that I've caught cheating over the years, there's one that always really sticks in my memory, and it's one that really I think back to all the time, and I always tell this story about this particular incident because it kind of, for me, illustrates some of the bigger points I'm trying to make that some of the research over the last 20 years has looked into. So one of the students that I caught cheating was a young lady, and I have to give you the context for this. It was an 8th grade honors class, and this particular young lady was taking some test, and I caught her cheating, plain as day. She had a cheat sheet. I went over. I just, went over, and I saw the cheat sheet, and I got the cheat sheet from her. And had I known that in the future I would write about this and talk about this, I would have saved this thing because it was an absolute work of art. The amount of, she had like 6 gigabytes of information on a 1-by-1 square little piece of paper. But anyway, I caught her. The whole class saw it. They all went, "Ooh, you got busted." And took it away and went through the typical things you do that they teach teachers to do. So one of the things the school that I worked at had us do was you have to call the parent at night and tell them when there's an incident like this. And I had made this call many times before. But this particular one stuck in my head because I made the call and I heard, I call and a voice picks up and goes, "Hello?" And I said, "Hello, this is Mr. Anderman. Can I speak to Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so?" And then I heard a voice go, "Okay." And then I said, "I'm waiting." And this little voice said, "It's me." And so I, thought, what do you do in this situation? So, and when I'm teaching like undergrad ed psych, I love giving this to them and then asking them, what would you do? But anyway, what I did was I just started, okay, well, I told the parent what happened, and I knew I was talking to the kid. And I just said, but I felt like I couldn't say anything, and I couldn't do that. So I just said, "Do you have any questions?" "No." "Anything else you want to ask me?" "No." I said, "Okay, goodbye." Next day in school, I saw this young lady, and I was compelled to just say, I said, "I know that was you. I'm not an idiot." And she gave me this look, and she goes, "It was my mom." And I said, and I just decided, you have to pick your battles, like just let it go. She already got a 0 on the test, and just leave it alone and let it go. But I wanted to make a point to her that I wasn't fooled. 3 weeks later, we had a back-to-school night when the parents were all at school, and this young lady's mother was there, and she came up to me and said, "Mr. Anderman, I want to apologize for how rude I was on the phone. I was in such shock at what you were telling me that I was speechless." So it actually was the mother. But I like telling that story because it illustrates a lot of things that have really affected my research on this. So my research on cheating has really asked the question, what's the psychological component of cheating? When kids are in that moment and trying to make the decision, it's a decision-making issue. Should I or shouldn't I? What are the variables that go into affecting that? And this young lady comes back to mind for many, many reasons. One of the main reasons she comes back to mind for me is that I learned over a period of time that she had multiple reasons for doing what she did. And she didn't really care too much that she got caught in terms of getting in trouble with me. It was other things. So obviously one of them was the grade. But the other thing that I wasn't aware of at the time that I am aware of now was she was cheating because of social issues that occurred during adolescence. She was in a class that was, now I said in the beginning, it was an honors class. So in this school, as in many, there are cliques, and these kids were a clique. They were a group. They were a social network. All right? And in this particular school, there were various social networks. And if you weren't part of one, you were part of another, or you were an outsider and you didn't belong to anything. Well, this young lady was part of this group, but her fear, realistic fear, was if I fail this honors class, they're going to switch me into the regular class. I'm going to be with those other kids, and I won't be cool anymore. And my friends will all reject me, and they'll see me as a dumb kid. That's what was going on in her head, and I know that from, I don't have time to go through the whole thing, but I know that from numerous conversations later. And that always fascinated me, and when I came back to this later as a researcher, I realized, it helped me realize how complicated cheating is, that it's not just a yes, no, but there's so many variables that play into the decision-making process. So some people cheat just for the grades, some cheat to please their parents, some cheat because of social pressures, some cheat because it's a thrill and exciting. So what I want to do today is really talk to you about this and give you some, just kind of walk you through some of the research that I've done on this topic. For those of you who are students, I always like to kind of share how I got interested in this. This has actually not been my main line of research, but it's the one that I get a lot of publicity for because the other stuff I guess people don't find interesting. But this has kind of been a sideline. But basically the way I got interested in this was I went to grad school. I was at the University of Michigan, studied motivation with really good motivation people. Nobody didn't do anything like this. Then when I became an assistant professor, I got the message that you can't keep doing what your advisors do. You have to break out on your own. You have to develop something of your own. So that's when I had this aha moment, and I said, hey, that cheating thing, let me go back to that. And this was about 1994, like 20 years ago, and we looked at the literature on cheating and realized that, believe it or not, there was almost nothing empirical and nothing driven by theory and nothing really very, certainly from a psychology perspective on cheating. So I thought, this is something I can do. This is something different. And so, it kind of worked for me. But so there had been stuff on cheating, but most of the stuff was just frequencies of do you do it, do you not do it? And nobody came at it with a theoretical lens. So that's what I tried to do. So cheating is something that we are constantly hearing about. It's in the news all the time. It never stops making the news, and it probably won't. A couple of recent examples some of you may have heard about. Radiology residents who were studying for the national board exam. It was a huge thing a few years ago where there was an underground system where all the students who were getting radiology, this is board certification, so these are already people who are licensed, were memorizing the questions and then going and contributing to this national database that they all looked at, and everybody knew the questions. Another one, this was on 60 Minutes, and it was all over the news in Great Neck, New York. High school students paying other kids up to $3,600 to take the SAT for them as imposters. There was one kid who did it, I think it was up to 15 different times. And this is, when you talk about cheating, there are different kinds of cheating. There's cheating where you sort of say, hey, Joe, can I peek? What did you get for number 3? Versus, would you take the SAT for me? There's degrees of severity in cheating, and this is really one of the most extreme cases. Atlanta, Georgia, there was a big scandal. In 44 schools, 178 principals and teachers basically took standardized tests, erased answers at night, changed them, turned them in that way. They even had what's called cheating parties. They had, I forgot what, it was like test-changing parties. Like they'd go to someone's house and they'd get wine and beer, and they'd sit around and erase answers and change them. Google it, you'll see there's tons of articles about it in the paper. Chicago, retesting in 117 classrooms, 76 classrooms were suspected of having cheating. Most of these are the teachers cheating also, not only the students. Educational Testing Service, some of you may remember this, I remember this pretty well. ETS issued statements in 2002 and 2009 warning graduate admissions folks that GRE scores were between 50 to 100 points higher than they expected them to be from China, South Korea, and Taiwan. And they were basically saying, I remember being, doing, grad admissions then, and it was like they just said, you just need to know this and do with it what you want. So it was like saying, some of these people probably cheated, and some of them probably didn't, and, have at it. And that just, all universities had to deal with that. Harvard University, 125 students, this is about 2 years ago, were accused of cheating in a government class on an exam. They shared answers. 70 of the students withdrew from Harvard. And Columbus, Ohio, and if you read the newspaper today, it's almost every day, our own cheating scandal. It was the data czar, Tankovich, whatever, was in, pleaded no contest or whatever yesterday, and he implicated Gene Harris, and we haven't heard the end of this. This is going on and on and on and on and on, but it's happened in our own backyard, so it's everywhere. All right, now one of the things people always ask me is how much does cheating occur? How frequent is it? How common is it? And this is one of the hardest questions to answer because for cheating researchers, the very nature of cheating is something people want to hide and people don't want to admit. So collecting data on how much it occurs is, this is not an easy thing to do. It's not easy to assess, it's not easy to ask, and so the measurement issue here, which I'm not going to talk a whole lot about, but that's been a whole other really interesting thing over the last 20 years is figuring out how you measure something that people want to hide. And I think we have a pretty good way of doing it at this point. Different estimates, 86% of high school students and 73% of all takers believe most people cheat at some point. This is one of my favorite statistics. Fewer college officials believe that cheating is a problem than do average citizens. Between 75 to 98% of college students reported having cheated in high school compared to 20% in the 1940s. About 75% of high school students admit to at least some form of academic dishonesty. Generally, cheating in high school has generally increased over the last half century for the most part. Bottom line is most kids, by the time they graduate high school, have cheated in one way or another. Now, that doesn't mean that every kid is a cheater by any means, but it means that at some point somebody would probably have said, hey, can I peek at what you get for number 3? I mean, so when you see these high statistics that say 95% of kids have cheated, that's what it's talking about. It's not that 95% of kids hired someone to take the SAT for them. Most of it's pretty innocuous, and I think a lot of it is, sometimes I think kids don't even know that it's cheating. And my son knows I tell this story, so I have permission, but when my son was was a freshman in high school last year. Now he's a sophomore. He was down in the basement. One of his buddies was over, and I just went down to get something out of the refrigerator in the basement, and I saw his friend copying Jacob's homework, and he didn't know what I do. And he was copying Jacob's homework, and I just kind of saw it out of the corner of my eye and said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm checking my answers. And I said, no, you're not. And my son said, he's going to talk about you. And I just kind of said, no, don't do that. Not in our house. And the other one, there are paper mills like schoolsucks.com. Some of these get over 8,000 hits a day. And I'm going to talk a little bit after about technology and how technology is changing the whole picture of all of this. Whoops, going the wrong way. Nope. All right. 90% of cheaters believe they won't get caught, according to U.S. News and World Report. 95% of cheaters don't get caught, according to the Ad Council and Educational Testing Service. So why do people cheat? People cheat, as I said before, when thinking about this young lady in my class for lots of reasons. For grades, for recognition, for status, for approval, for awards. There's lots of different reasons. I had one friend in high school whose parents told him, if you get over a 700 on your verbal and your math SATs, we will buy you a car. And I don't think this guy cheated, but I mean the temptation to cheat is huge. So when we talk about incentives and rewards that we give people, I mean that adds fuel to the fire. All right, so this is then, why do people cheat? What are some of the psychological reasons? One of them is we know from prior research that people who are impulsive are more likely to cheat. People who people who are more likely to gamble, who can't resist the impulse, that has something to do with it. Students who are in academic cultures that support it, where people who are in situations where everybody does it, are more likely to do it if they feel like nobody cares, nobody looks at this here. People have low self-efficacy in a particular subject, low confidence. Like, I don't feel confident in math, I'm going to be more likely to cheat in math. Moral reasoning is basically unrelated to cheating. This is one of my favorite ones, and people are often surprised by that. I know most of you are early childhood people, and this, most of what I do here is not early childhood, but I think there's a lot of overlap, and one of them is moral development. And people have done lots of studies where they've looked at various measures in adolescence and college of moral reasoning and moral development, and at the end of the day, that doesn't really predict cheating. These other things I'm going to talk about do. Students who say it's wrong to cheat still often engage in cheating. One of the studies we did, which really fascinated me, that was published, was we looked at sort of a breakdown of people. We did like a 2-by-2 table of people who cheat and don't cheat, and people who think it's morally good and morally bad. And we had people in all 4 quadrants. So there are people who say to you, and a lot of people who say, I know it's wrong to cheat, but sure, I do it anyway. Those are some of the most interesting ones to me. How do people cheat? Obviously, copying on exams, copying assignments. Plagiarism is huge, particularly with the internet and with college. I do research on this, and people would say, well, your students never cheat. I have had many cases of plagiarism. I think I'm pretty good at catching it because I know some of the ways people do it, but plagiarism is still enormous, huge. Imposters taking exams, and technology is really big. And some of the ways people are doing this with technology, one of the ways is texting answers. So this is one that I know is very common in schools. In my son's high school, they're allowed to have cell phones during the day, which I think is actually kind of cool. They teach the kids, you've got to be responsible, you're not allowed to have it out during class, but they're allowed to have them. And my son has a cell phone, and at the end of the day, if he's going to a friend's house, he can text me or my wife, and we know where he's going. But the other thing is, one of the most common things, kids are taking tests. You have chemistry first period, you take the test, you run out, and you quickly text your friend who has chemistry second period to tell them the questions. That's real, and that's happening all over the place. Oops. Photographing exams with phones, simple electronic thievery. We already talked about plagiarism, buying papers online. One of the new ones is smartwatches. Like, people will say, no cell phones, everyone put your cell phone away. Well, now we have smartwatches, so you can have the answers on the watch. And we have Google Glass, where you can have the answers in your glasses. This is all real, and right now in our classrooms, some of this goes on. One of the newest ones I read about is called the bathroom iPod method. And this is one that I just discovered, but apparently it's fairly popular with students. So before the test, you go to the men's room or ladies' room, and you take your iPod and you hide it in the bathroom. And then during the exam, you say, I really need to go to the bathroom, and you go to the bathroom, and you take out your iPod and look up the answers that you need, go back, and nobody ever sees you with it. So, we're in a new age, and everything that we do instructionally, we have to think about in such a different way. When I started doing this research in 1994, none of this really was out there. So this has all been changing, and it still is changing. All right. Now, so what I tried to do really is apply the psychological lens to this. As I said, a lot of the research was just sort of reports of do you do it, do you not do it, some demographics. And I'm trying to get at this question of, well, why do people do it? What's going on in their heads when they do it? Basically, what we know from and I'm going to show you some studies. This is some of what we confirm that people really already knew. Students who are focused on grades and extrinsic outcomes are more likely to cheat. Students who learn in classrooms that emphasize grades and extrinsic outcomes are more likely to cheat. But less cheating occurs if students are focused on mastery and if teachers emphasize and assess students based on mastery. This is sort of my punchline, and I'm kind of come to it at the, before I even show you the empirical data, this is sort of my take-home message. Is cheating inevitable? Is it an incurable epidemic? Cheating is not inevitable, and the basic proof for it is we have really strong empirical evidence from data we've been collecting that you can take the same student and put them in a classroom where the teacher always talks about grades, and this is the important message, and I think the one that we don't do well in teacher ed programs, if you're always talking about grades and the test on Friday and the standardized test and the Ohio Achievement Test, and if you're always talking about grades, you're going to have more cheating in your classroom. If, on the other hand, you talk about mastery and learning and not grades, it doesn't mean you don't give grades and tests, but your rhetoric, your dialogue, the way you talk is different. You focus on the learning and not on the test, you get less cheating. And that's sort of my big, you can leave now. But no, don't, please. But that's really what the big finding has been. And so this is something where I say teachers make a humongous, huge difference in this. And this is something where I think, again, we don't get this message across as well as we need to in teacher ed programs about the way we talk to kids has a huge impact on this. And one of the most clear-cut things is when you look at people who cheat, kids who cheat, most kids don't cheat in all their classes. They cheat in certain classes. And the teacher has so much to do with that. So this is a good thing because we can teach people how to talk about and use different kinds of rhetoric in the classroom and to avoid this. Okay, so what are some of the basic things we know? We know it's increased over time. In general, males cheat more than females. That is an often cited statistic. The difference is really tiny, and one of the things I always say is that it could just be that the females are better at cheating than the males, and the males are getting caught. So everybody cheats. Science and math more than other subjects, older students more than younger, low achievers more than high achievers, but plenty of high achievers cheat. I mean, look at how much academic dishonesty goes on in the university. Most of our students are pretty high achievers. The theoretical framework that I use, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the sort of two theories from psychology that guide this, that really frame the work, are what we call goal orientation theory and stage environment fit or person environment fit. Goal orientation is a way of looking at motivation where we basically say when you're doing an academic task, so I have a child and I give them a book to read, what's their goal when they're reading the book? Mastery means my goal is I want to read the book and understand the book and master it. I want to just know this stuff because it's good to know. That's a mastery goal. Performance goal is when you say my goal is to read this book as fast as I can and show the teacher how smart I am. Or my goal is I'm a bad reader and I want to do everything I can to avoid looking dumb. So I'm going to pretend I'm reading when I'm not really reading. And an extrinsic goal is when your goal is just I want to read this thing because I want to get an A. I want to read this thing because if you read 3 books by the end of the month, you get to go to, you get a pizza party. That's an extrinsic goal. Stage environment fit, I'm not going to really talk a whole lot about, just given the time. All right, so to just briefly share with you some of the empirical and conceptual work that we did, Tamara Murdoch, who's at the University of Missouri, and I published an article in Ed Psychologist where we really tried to lay out the theoretical framework for this. And what we basically said is that when people cheat and they're making this decision, so you're sitting there, will I cheat, won't I cheat? There's 3 questions people ask. What's my purpose? Can I do this task? And what are the costs associated with cheating? All right? So you're a student, you're sitting there, you have a cheat sheet, you're trying to decide if you should do it. These are the 3 things that people ask themselves. What's my purpose? That means, why am I doing this? Why am I in this class? Why am I doing this assignment? If your purpose is really about learning it because it's important for you, you're probably going to be less likely to cheat. If your purpose is, I want to get into med school and I've got to take this stupid organic chemistry class and I could care less about it, you're going to be more likely to cheat. Second question is, can I do this task? If you feel competent, self-efficacy, if you feel like you can do it, you're not going to be as likely to cheat. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Why would you cheat if you know how to do it? On the other hand, if you get a problem to do or something and you don't feel confident, you're more likely to cheat. So that's the second thing that goes into us. And the third are, what are the costs? And the cost is saying, what's the likelihood that I'll get caught? What'll happen if I get caught? And the other part of cost, and we write a lot about it, is the cost to your self-concept also. Is it okay for me to cheat? Can I live with that? And some people can and some people can't. A lot of kids can live with it. They can justify it. So the influences on cheating, basically, there's your individual beliefs, there's these contextual influences, and that ultimately leads to whether or not you're going to cheat. Sorry, I want to move that very quickly. All right, so a couple of empirical studies, just real quickly, and if anybody's interested in, I can email you the citations, but just to sort of show you how we actually found this. This study was published in the Journal of Ed Psych. It was one of the first empirical studies that I published. This was a really simple study, and when I go back and look at it, there was nothing that fancy. It wasn't rocket science. This got so much publicity, and probably because it was one of the first empirical studies in a peer-reviewed journal that looked at cheating, and it was on, it was the Boston Globe and MSNBC, and all these people were calling me, and it was just because it was a topic that nobody had done before. So it's just like, and I was not extrinsically motivated when I did this. I wasn't expecting that. But this study got tons of press. What we did was we looked at cheating in 285 middle school students in science. We measured beliefs about cheating. We measured their actual cheating behavior, which is how often in this science class do you cheat. And we measured that we have a scale that measures the acceptability of cheating. Do you think it's morally okay for you to cheat? And basically what we found, we controlled for everything that you control for. We used logistic regression for the analyses. And what we found was that kids were more likely to cheat when their science teacher emphasized grades, when the school emphasized grades, and when they worried about math. All right? And that was after controlling for all the demographics and achievement and all kinds of other things. This is what we found. So what did it mean? Science teacher emphasizing grades. If you're in a science class in middle school where the teacher is saying, you're going to have a test on Friday, you better know this now because you won't do well in high school if you don't learn this now, and teacher's just talking about the grades, more cheating in that class. When a school emphasizing grades, what does that mean? That means when you walk into a school, what's the first thing when you walk into a school, to the lobby of a school, you often see? The very first thing in the lobby, particularly a middle school and a high school. Trophies? The honor roll. Thank you. I couldn't have planted better people. Trophies and the honor roll. And what's the message that sends to every kid every day when they walk in the building and they see that? What's the implicit message or explicit? Who does the school value? High achievers. We value people who get good grades and people who are elite athletes. All right? That's what we mean by a school emphasizing performance. So particularly from the grade point of view, when a school is all about, all that matters here is good grades. That's when we get more cheating in those schools. Acceptability of cheating was predicted by the personal goal of getting high grades and, again, the teacher emphasizing grades. So, this was very clear. What we were finding was from these 300 kids, not everyone was cheating in science, and the biggest predictors of whether they were what was going on primarily in the science classrooms. So it wasn't their moral development, and it wasn't their personality, and it wasn't these other things. It was just what the teacher was doing and emphasizing. The context made a huge, huge difference. All right, and so we've done other studies where we've replicated this. So this next one, this is a study we published in Contemporary Ed Psych in 2004. We had about 600 adolescents. This is the first and, to my knowledge, only longitudinal study of academic cheating that's ever been published. We followed 600 kids across 3 time points, and we looked at how their cheating changed over time. We collected data from them in the fall of 8th grade, the spring of 8th grade, and the spring of 9th grade. They transitioned from middle school to high school between 8th and 9th grade. We used HLM, growth curve modeling with time-varying covariates, so it can make Christian happy. So but I say that because we really tried to do this in a way that was really, statistically appropriate to looking at growth over time with growth curve modeling to really, if we find something, hopefully it's really real and not just an artifact of error. It was the first longitudinal study, and what we found, and the results of this I think were pretty cool. Cheating increased over the transition from middle school to high school, controlling for everything else. And other people have found that who've just looked at things, percentage-wise. When kids move from middle school to high school, cheating goes up. When they move from elementary to middle school, cheating goes up. So we found that. But the other thing that we found was that perceptions of the classroom mastery goal structure were related to less cheating. What that means is a mastery goal structure means, this was in math, by the way, it was all in mathematics. So when the math teachers focused on mastery, they talked about, why are you learning the Pythagorean theorem? Why are we learning how to figure out the angles in a triangle? Why is this important? How can you use this in your career? You didn't get as much cheating. When they said, quiz on Friday, memorize the formula, you got more cheating. Perceptions of a performance goal structure related to an increase in cheating. This is when teachers talked more about the grades. But this was the neatest finding, and I really think this is pretty powerful. It didn't go up for everyone. Cheating didn't increase for everyone. Cheating went up. We really broke things down by the classrooms, and we looked at things in terms of the middle school math classroom and the high school math classroom, and we broke it down with data at both time points. And what we found was that cheating went up when kids moved from a high mastery to a low mastery classroom across the transition. What does that mean? In 8th grade, you are in a class where the teacher really is focused on mastery in math. This is important. This is why you're learning it. This is how it's going to be helpful to you. And then in 9th grade, you have a teacher who doesn't do that. It doesn't mean they're focused on the grades. They just don't talk about why the stuff's important and why you need to master it. Cheating went up for those kids. Increase in cheating when people move from a low performance-oriented to a high performance-oriented classroom. So when you were in a middle school classroom where the teacher did not talk a lot about grades, and then you move to high school and suddenly it's grades, 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 the grades matter, cheating went up for those kids in math. And there was a decrease in cheating when kids moved from low mastery to high mastery classes. So you were in middle school and you had a middle school teacher who didn't really talk about mastery much at all and just kind of said, just didn't talk about why math's important and why you should learn it. High school, you suddenly got a teacher who really was all jazzed up about it and talked about it a lot in a very positive way. Cheating went down for those kids. So what's the message? Again, same as the other study, but this one was a little more sophisticated and longitudinal. Same message. What the teacher does makes a huge difference in terms of cheating. Huge, huge difference. All right? And one of the other things that I always, people always question me about with this is, but all that matters is test scores. And this is why, as someone who studies motivation, I say, test scores aren't the only outcome. We may get kids who have really high test scores, but at what cost? And this is showing that we can get kids who achieve really well, but the way we teach them, we're going to get more cheating. So, the test score is not always the ultimate outcome, at least in my world. All right, this next one, we looked at specifically at impulsivity and cheating. Don't you love this? You see that? That's real. We looked at impulsivity and cheating in relation to motivation. And what we basically did in this study was as a different sample, about 600 adolescents, most of them were 9th graders, from 5 high schools in 2 Midwestern cities. Ethnicity, have reported, was a pretty diverse group. 55% were European American, 32% African American. And we had 3 things that we measured. We measured academic cheating, the extrinsic goals, the mastery goal structure, which is how much the teacher talks about mastery, the extrinsic goal structure, which is how much the teacher talks about grades in the students' minds, and impulsive decision making, which is a personality scale basically measuring impulsivity. All right? And people have done this before, so studying impulsivity with cheating wasn't new. But what was new in this study was we looked at it in relation to the motivation variables. Nobody had done that before. So we had 2 time points also in the data. It was longitudinal, but we didn't collect cheating at 2 time points. The first time point we collected demographics, and we collected the baseline measure of impulsivity, which is a personality trait, which you wouldn't expect to change, so you would only measure that at baseline. Time 2, we collected data on the students cheating and on the goal structures, which is, again, what they perceive their teachers as emphasizing. We did what's called multinomial logistic regression, which is basically logistic regression with 3 different categories. So we had 3 different groups of kids. We had kids who never cheated, kids who occasionally cheated, and kids who were extensive cheaters. All right, and we broke them into those 3 groups. And what we found was that impulsivity predicts cheating for the extensive cheaters only. All right, so for the kids who are heavy-duty cheaters, impulsivity matters. They're even more likely to cheat if they're impulsive. But, and this is what I think the really cool finding is, the laser doesn't work, mastery goal structure was related negatively to cheating for extensive teachers. What does that mean? That means you take these highly impulsive kids who are extensive cheaters, but you put them in a classroom where the teacher says, mastery, why are we here? We're here to learn. Don't worry about the test. We're here to learn. Those kids are less likely to cheat in that classroom. So even the kids who are perennial cheaters and who have this impulsive personality are still going to be less likely to cheat when you put them in that classroom. So again, things that the teacher does make a huge difference. This is something just really quickly to share with you. We did a study. We haven't published this yet, but we did interviews with 60 high school students about cheating. And this is a study that we did here in Columbus since I got to Ohio State. And we went out and we interviewed kids. I dabbled in qualitative research, and it was good, and I lived, and it was all good. And what we did, and I have to give credit to my collaborators on this, were Antoinette Arante and Lindley Anderman, and they really held my hand through the qualitative part. But what we did was we did hour-long interviews with 60 kids. We have this fabulous data set of 60 hours of kids talking about why they cheat. And all I want to do is really share with you just some of the interesting things that they said. And the reason we did this was because pretty much we've been replicating the same finding. We know that, from the quantitative stuff, that what the teacher does matters. But now we wanted to kind of dig deeper and see what did the kids tell us about this. So there's a lot of variety in kids' reasons for cheating. Bottom line was this extrinsic motivation really came out in this. Here's a couple of things the kids said. One of the things we asked was, why do kids in your school cheat? And the student, Eyal, who goes to a public suburban high school that shall remain nameless, but it's in the greater Columbus area, said this: just to get better grades and get into a better college. Cheating has a direct effect to what college you get into and how much money you make in the future. So like cheating, that could directly affect how big your house is or how nice your car is, all right? So this is what some kids are thinking when they're cheating. Why am I cheating? Because I want to have the nice house, and I want to live in the nice house like I grew up in. Hillary, who went to a private Catholic school, said everything here is like it's all about college prep. I don't want to get bad grades in this class because it's for like the rest of my life pretty much. I feel like because you go to a Catholic school, you should get better grades because you're paying for your education, so you don't really want to let your parents down by having them pay tuition, by not really trying or getting bad grades. This was one that was really interesting. There was these kids going to Catholic school who are, there was a lot of cheating at the Catholic school that we went into. And a lot of them, some of them were saying the parents were paying tuition, and so they were cheating because they basically get in trouble, they disappoint their parents, and so, you're going supposedly for this great moral education, but it's still happening there. Callie, who went to an urban high school, said, yeah, I think grades is the main reason why everybody cheats, because of grades. Another question we asked were, what were you thinking about when you decided to cheat? Kate, who went to a suburban high school, said, all that mattered was getting a better grade on my last test. Maddie, high school student, said, I cheated on my math test. My teacher trusted me, and she left the room to go have lunch break. I pulled out my notes because I didn't understand what I was doing because I was absent, and I cheated. What were you thinking about when you decided to cheat? The student said, don't get caught. I'm feeling bad that I'm doing it, but I don't want to ruin my grade in the class because I was already passing it. I don't want to take a chance in ruining my grade because I was already taking the retake. I did horrible on the first test, and I was taking the retake to get a better grade. I totally forgot to study. So I was just like, okay, these are word for word, obviously. Okay, I'll cheat just this one time. And that's just like what I was thinking. Just hopefully I won't get caught. That's all that mattered, getting a better grade on my last test. All right, so I have thousands of these. They go on and on and on. But it was really hearing the kids talk about it and elaborate confirmed what we found, but really made us see how widespread it was. And we really deliberately chose to look at a public school in inner city, a suburban public school, and a private religious school. And there were some differences, but not a lot. Cheating still happened everywhere, mostly for the same reasons. Last one I want to show you is, this is a preview. We're presenting this at APA next week, so this is hot off the presses, brand new. This is a study that we did with two of my, Riche Hamilton, who is a PhD student in Ed Psych, and Kathy Kirkpatrick, who recently completed her PhD in Ed Psych. And what we did with this one was we looked at cheating in the classes people hate the most. Okay, we said, let's look at the class people really hate and see if, what we can find about that class. So this was one with college students. I don't usually do this with college students, but this one, we use college students. They're not Ohio State students, by the way. About 300 college students. We asked them to think about the class you like the least in college, during their college days. And what we found was that cheating in that class was predicted by an interaction of extrinsic goal structure and sensation seeking. Now, what is sensation seeking? This is kind of like impulsivity. A high sensation seeker is somebody who likes thrills. One of the items on the scale, and this is a very well-known and used a lot, is I like bungee jumping. I like going on crazy roller coasters. So people who are high on that are high sensation seekers, people who like the thrill, all right? So what does this interaction mean? I mean, it sounds like a lot of gibberish, but when you see the picture, the top line are high sensation seekers. The middle line are mid-level sensation seekers. The bottom line are low sensation seekers. And what this is basically saying is that the x-axis, this is the extrinsic goal structure in the classroom. This is their perception of how much the teacher in the class that they hated talked about grades and test scores. This is cheating. It's actually the squared value of cheating because of the distribution to fix that. And what you can basically see is that for the high sensation seekers, the top line, the yellow line, as the perception of the teacher talking about grades went up, cheating went up. For the bottom line, the blue one, the low sensation seekers, as the perception of extrinsic goals went up, cheating actually went down. So what's the message here? It's particularly a bad situation if you take people who are high sensation seekers and you put them in a class where teachers are constantly talking about grades. So it's still that message about when teachers are always talking about and emphasizing the grades, that's going to be a bad thing in terms of cheating, but particularly for these high sensation seekers. So again, high sensation seekers, highly impulsive people, you put them in these classrooms where people are talking about grades, you're just lighting, you're lighting the fuse, ready for cheating to happen. All right, so to sum up, conclusions. Students cheat because of grades. That's pretty much, we knew that, we still know that, that's never going to change. I mean, it's a sad thing to say, but it's not going to change, probably. But there are some positives to this. Students who are highly impulsive and high sensation seekers may be particularly tempted to cheat, and this is as a function of motivation. You put these high sensation seekers and these highly impulsive kids in classrooms where the teachers are talking about grades, whether it's middle school or high school or college, you're going to get more cheating. I have not done this with elementary school age kids, right? And I know most of you are early childhood people, but I would bet that you would find the same thing with elementary school kids to a lesser extent. And kids think in elementary school about cheating a little differently, so there are developmental issues there, which we can talk about. Cheating is less likely to occur when students perceive a focus on mastery. Now, if any of you are familiar with Metro. Metro is a mastery school. Everything they do is mastery. I've never studied cheating in that school, but one would think in that school you would have less cheating because everything there's about mastery. You don't move on to more complex topics till you've mastered the first topic. All right? So from a cheating perspective, schools that are focused on mastery, there's a lot of support for doing that. Cheating increases developmentally, but increases are not inevitable. We know that elementary school kids cheat less than middle school kids. They cheat less than high school kids. High school and college, it's kind of, it's pretty even. But that's not inevitable. What we know now is that the kind of classroom you're in makes a huge difference. If you're in the right kind of classroom with the right kind of teacher, it's not just going to keep going up and up and up. Oops. Cheating is, for the most part, unrelated to demographics. This is one of the few things in education where you really can't say much about gender or anything really about ethnicity, race, SES. This cuts across the board. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it. The same things predict it for everybody. So this isn't something where we have any kind of gap with more cheating occurring in one group or another. The only one, as I said, that comes out sometimes is gender, but that's really tiny. I mean, it's statistically significant in big samples, but the differences are minute. And finally, the last thing, educators can have effects on cheating, both good and bad. And again, I come back to, I think in teacher education, I don't think we don't talk about this much. They, maybe get, I know they get it when they take intro ed psych, because I make sure they get it, and I know it's in most of the intro ed psych books now, which is a good thing. I don't know how much in other classes people get it, but I know when people get out there teaching, they often don't feel prepared to deal with it. So there are things we can do, and I think one of the real missed opportunities when we train teachers is to really talk with teachers about the way we talk about what we're teaching. And if we talk to kids always about grades and test scores, and that's certainly what the pressures on teachers is to do, there's going to be some pretty negative outcomes in terms of some of, you may get, like I said, high achievement, but there's a cost. You may get more cheating and other things going on. So that is it. Thank you.